Space, the final frontier. Join us for a bold conversation. Our prime directive? To recap our favorite Star Trek shows, both new and old. To engage in debate about all things Trek. Prepare to energize with phasers set to stun.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Phasers Set to Stun. In this ongoing series by a Film By podcast, we explore every quadrant of the expanding Trek universe by covering television, animation, movies, directors, and more. Plotting the course as always is your core Trek crew. I'm Scott Hoffman.
And I'm Wayne Whited.
And our crewmate David Burns is on a classified mission, and we hope he'll be able to join us again soon. But in the meantime, Wayne and I are taking a look at one of the many Trek-focused documentaries to help you find the best behind-the-scenes stories available. We're talking today about the 2018 documentary What We Left Behind, a look back at Star Trek DS9.
That's right.
So, obviously, we haven't covered Deep Space Nine yet. We'll get to that in Starter Treks. So consider this a red alert for spoilers. Highly recommend that you watch the series, obviously, before you see this documentary.
Definitely.
But just to give people an idea of what it's about beyond the obvious in the title, What We Left Behind is more than a personal love letter to the show and its fans from the creators and cast. It's narrated by showrunner Ira Steven Behr, and it's a documentary that's more than a collection of talking head interviews. It brings together the original writers and showrunners to imagine what the next unproduced 8th season would look like, set 20 years after the finale. It also gives us a rare last glimpse of the original cast coming together for a look back at what the show meant to them, to the Star Trek universe, and to television in general. For any Deep Space Nine fan, in my opinion, this doc is a must-see. Wayne,
Yes.
would you agree?
I definitely agree. It's a fantastic documentary.
So what brought this to the top of your watch list originally?
Well, the documentary came to my attention sometime, I think it was early 2008, or excuse me, 2018. It was right after the crowdfunding on Indiegogo was finished, which that unfortunately meant that I couldn't help take part in it, but I was really interested in seeing it because I love Deep Space Nine. I love all the Star Trek, to tell you the truth, to be honest. But
Yeah, same here.
I followed Deep Space Nine from beginning to end. I thought it was a great idea. DS9 seems to be like the forgotten Star Trek anymore. It's rarely talked about, rarely rerun on television anymore. It's usually the only reruns we see is Next Generation. But during its 7 years on TV, it had a very rocky production, a lot of behind-the-scenes problems, and I knew there'd be a lot of interesting things to be told with this documentary, and a lot of things revealed, a lot of stories we'd never heard of before finally being told. Like I said, I was a big fan of DS9 from the beginning. I remember being really excited when they announced it back in '92, and I loved the pilot. I still think it's the best pilot episode of all the Star Trek series. And I watched every episode through all its 7-year run. Heck, I remember I watched the season finale with David at his place when it first aired back in '99. So I looked forward to this, and when it was released, I immediately bought it.
Yeah, I agree. Deep Space Nine, I think, is underappreciated.
Yes.
Even though I know it has a strong fan base with a lot of heart behind it. Those who like it, love it.
And it had a very strong fan base when it aired, too. Very vocal fan base. When we all knew it was going to end at its 7 years, because that's the way Next Generation did. But they really came out and argued with Paramount to try to continue it to its 8th season, which would have been interesting. And with this documentary, we actually get to see a little bit of maybe some plans of what it would have been like.
Yeah, that's one of the things that surprised me about this one, is that they set out to make sure that it wasn't just a collection of interviews or group discussions or anything else like that. That they said, okay, there's no studio involved, budget is not an issue, we can do whatever we want. How would we come back to this 20 years later? Which is kind of an interesting thing to see nowadays, having been through 3 seasons of Picard.
Yeah.
Right? When they essentially did the same kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. It's very similar. And, for me, the question would be, should the series come back? I don't know. I'd have to debate that. But if it did, I think what they came up with was unique and would actually work really well on TV.
Yeah, there were definitely some shocking moments, and we'll talk about that a
Hmm.
little bit later. But a lot of surprises in this one.
Yes, there was.
Right out of the gate, it's showing that Max Grodenchik, the actor who played Rom, can sing well, can sing pretty well. Like it opens up with a kind of a music number between Max and a few of the other cast members.
That's right. It's a great little musical piece.
Yeah, it's also kind of an interesting time capsule because we get to see a lot of those who we've lost, right?
That's right.
Renee, help me out with the pronunciation. Renee
Auberjonois.
Auberjonois, thank you.
That's right.
And Aaron Eisenberg.
Yes, yes.
It was great to see their perspective on the show. And I really am glad that this documentary was done at a time when we could capture all of that.
And it was just done, too, because Renee passed away just a couple months after this was released.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I really hate to hear how rough the critics were on this show. I thought it was an interesting choice for them to kind of read from some of the negative criticism that they were getting, or kind of the fan mail, and kind of read that aloud. That was a little heartbreaking.
Ooh,
in
it was
some cases.
scathing at places. Some of that was incredible. But, we hear about that all day, especially today. I mean, you hear about a lot of, especially with the Star Wars, some fans can be very vocal. And, they take it to an extreme. And that's not something new. That was something that was done all the way back there in 1993.
Yeah. I guess the other aspect that surprised me was that we didn't get a chance to see Avery Brooks with the rest of the cast.
Yeah, that was my biggest. It was a surprise, actually, but biggest disappointment. I don't know why he refused to take part in it. I mean, they were able to use archive interview footage from it, which I think was recorded for the DVD release. But which it fit perfectly. I mean, he's there in spirit and with the interviews. But considering he's taken part in quite a few other Star Trek documentaries, and he's always been very very supportive of the show in his time on it over the years. He still makes convention appearances, and I don't know why he didn't appear in this one, agree to do new interviews with this one. But he did. I guess they did talk to him, and it was his idea, Avery Brooks' idea, to not do this as a regular documentary, and do it something special. And I believe Stephen Bear said that it was because of Avery Brooks that they came up with the idea of creating the season 8 idea.
Yeah, which is great, because there's the section in this where it talks about several people, it seems like, independently comment that talking to Avery is like talking to a jazz musician.
Yes.
Right? That it's very, very fluid, very kinetic.
I can see
takes
that.
you to surprising but good places. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else that surprised you in this one?
Well, it was a surprise. I knew it was coming, but just to see it was a surprise. The footage that was used from the series in this documentary was all done and remastered in high definition, and it is the only high definition footage that we probably will ever see of Deep Space Nine, and they did that on purpose. I don't know if you know a little bit of the story, but back in 2012, Paramount went through the whole process of doing the Next Generation in high definition, and that was a monumental task. They had to completely build the show from the ground up. They ordered all the negatives from the salt mine where they were stored, and everything. They re-edited the episodes back together the way they were, and then all the visual effects had to be recreated. Of course, with the Next Generation, all the visual effects were done, physically with models, and so they had all that footage, and that allowed them to do it within a budget. And the budget was quite high. I believe it was something close to 4 or 5 million a season.
Wow.
Because they were basically doing the entirety of post-production for every episode, all 178 episodes. And for Deep Space Nine, the exact same thing would have to be done, but with Deep Space Nine and Voyager, by the way. Starting with season 4, they started to move from using physical models to CGI, and which means that they don't have that building blocks like they have with the Next Generation. That all the visual effects would have to be created from scratch by CGI artists, and it would raise the price incredibly high, way too high to actually consider even doing the series in high definition, which means we'll never see it in HD. But for this documentary, they were able to convince Paramount and pay for it, to send them that raw footage. And for the 30 minutes of footage that they have from the series, they did just that. They rebuilt it from the ground up and did all the post-production. And we see a glimpse of what the show would look like if it was ever done in high definition. And it's beautiful. Wow. It really is beautiful. That scene with the battle is incredible.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, I wasn't aware of that, but it definitely looks like it. It's a beautiful, I mean, I know there's differing opinions on the Dominion War and all this other kind of stuff. I think it's a standout aspect of this series, the way that they went into it.
It is.
And I think all of those sequences are choreographed beautifully. And yeah, the remastering does a lot for it.
All the colors pop and the details are so incredible in those scenes. It's sad that we won't see the entire series like that, but at least we got this glimpse that they did.
Exactly. So what were some of the most interesting things that you learned in this doc?
Well, for me, and let me put a little bit of a spoiler alert here. For me, it was hearing from her own mouth exactly what happened with Terry Farrell and the producers at the end of season 6. There had been a lot of rumors, a lot of tabloid headlines back in the day. That was 1998. But we never really knew the true story. I remember back then we were being told, well, this is what Paramount was feeding us, that she left voluntarily because she didn't want to commit to just doing one more year of the show. And she was offered a part on a new sitcom called Becker with Ted Danson, which was a much more lucrative and longer job. And of course, that all made sense, but here in this documentary, she tells the true story, and in actuality, she was forced out. And even 20 years later, it's a really hard subject for her to talk about. And seeing her break down and cry on screen, describing the abuse that she took from the producers was really heartbreaking. Terry Farrell, she's such a sweet and wonderful actress. I got to meet her back in December at GalaxyCon, and I told her how much I love the character Jadzia Dax, and I wasn't lying. I really do. That's my favorite character on the series and always has been. I have an action figure of Jadzia sitting on my work desk here at home, and have for quite a few years now, sitting right next to Grand Nagus Zek, two of my favorite characters from the series.
You got the Nagus. That's fantastic. Yeah, and I totally agree. She did an amazing job in that role. I think she's a fantastic actress. I'm glad you got to meet her. I think with the Dax symbiote, we got a great follow-up performance in that last season.
We did.
With Ezri Dax. So nothing against Nicole, but that was one of the things that actually made me angry when I was watching the show originally. It was like, what? One of the favorite characters from the beginning. She did so much for the Trill culture, but also for strong female characters, which is a theme throughout this show. It did a lot for elevating female roles in the Star Trek universe.
Yes, I mean, look how much that Deep Space Nine contributed to the whole Star Trek lore. You just mentioned the Trills, but the Cardassians, the Bajorans, the Ferengi were all explored and expanded, and it's incredible the folklore, the mythology of Star Trek that came from the 7 years of this show.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you mentioned one of the things that interested me the most was learning more about the Ferengi cast and the Ferengi characters. There's a lot of great stories in here about the closeness of the cast that was in that Ferengi life. So we've got the characters of Quark, Nog, Ram, Lita, Mugi, the Grand Nagus. all apparently would come together at Armin's house, at Quark's house, and rehearse together. To hear that they were such a close-knit group is great to hear. And it's also
Yeah.
interesting to just know, from Next Generation. I think we've talked with Jeff before, and he's like, I can't stand the Ferengi. They're
Mm,
just they're very grating characters, but in this one they bring them to such a higher level or a
yes.
deeper level that we talked about in Lower Decks, and we see play out in a lot of other IP that's related to Trek. But um, just hearing how much they kind of stuck together and became a little family unit within a larger family unit
Hmm.
is fantastic. And it was also just interesting to hear that their forehead prosthetics were basically like fingerprints for the individual characters. I didn't know they were that unique, but
Yeah, that's another thing you bring up. The makeup on this series is incredible, and they do touch on this, the hardships that the actors had to go through. Those actors, they hated that makeup, and I can
hmm
understand, because I mean, you think about it. Think of all the different aliens. You have, you know, Renee and Armin Shimmerman and all the Ferengi. They had to wear that day after day after day, and those
yeah,
aren't just little bits. Those aren't just bits on the forehead. Those are practically full head makeup, and I mean, could you imagine having to wear all that for 7 years? No wonder they hate it.
no, no. I mean, it says a lot for Renee specifically. Like I love the story that Ira brings up where Renee comes out in frustration and just rips his facial prosthesis off and says, "Here, you take it." And then
Yeah.
Ira still has it in his library. I think that's really sweet.
Oh, that was great. And I loved they did show a little clip of the rehearsal for the Ferengi, and I found it rather humorous and I understand too that they rehearsed with their teeth in,
Yeah,
because it changed the way they talked. It changed the way they vocalized their words, so they had to. And I never really thought about it until that point, seeing them and without the makeup, but with the weird, nasty teeth in. It
right.
was actually rather humorous, but it made sense. They had to do it that way.
Yeah. Well, that speaks to their endurance too. Like
Yes, it
they're
does.
willing to do that season after season.
Oh, couldn't imagine.
Um, there was a funny tidbit about the makeup chair where I think it was Armin was talking about how Colm Meaney would
Hmm.
complain about makeup, even though his makeup process could take like 3 to 5 minutes, and everybody else is in this chair for hours and just sweating.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet Nana Visitor?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. That same convention at GalaxyCon. I've met quite a few of the Deep Space Nine, although I've never met Avery Brooks. I did years ago get to meet Rene Auberjonois, and he was fantastic. I remember my mom was with me, and he treated her so well.
Wow.
He was such a joy and always smiling. I'm so glad I got to meet him back then. But yes, I got to meet Nana. We got to meet Armin at one time. I met Chase Masterson. I can't even remember them all now.
Yeah. Well, she had a lot of great things to say, a lot of great reflections on her arc
Yes.
as a character, which is amazing. Um, and interesting to kind of think about her past as a terrorist
Hmm.
and how that would play out in 2018, let alone today.
Yeah, I
Uh,
found that a very interesting part of the documentary. And they're right. It's something you don't really think about. I don't think they could have written the series as they did today. It wouldn't have worked.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it was one of the many stories where it seemed like there were um, differing memories of the show.
Yeah.
Like there was the scene where Nana is talking to Ira about the time that he tried to convince her that he was going to write a script where she had an affair with Goldicott. And she gets very fired up. She's like, no, 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 don't tell me that didn't happen because it happened.
Yeah.
Um, I loved hearing reflections from the actor who played Garrick, Andrew Robinson.
Oh, yes,
He
he's
has a lot of
fantastic.
personality he adds into this.
He does.
Same with James Darren, reflecting
Hmm.
on Vic Fontaine.
Yeah,
Um,
that's someone I've met before. I love James Darren. I loved him on Time Tunnel, and I loved
yeah,
him on Deep Space Nine. He's fantastic. Yeah,
It's a very surprising use of a holodeck character.
it is. But I mean, it was great that he was a latecomer on the show, but I loved his appearances every time he appeared. I looked forward to those episodes, and they were fun. They were fun episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and he has a great arc with Nog, a very formative arc
Yeah.
that speaks with a lot of the issues that they addressed
Hmm.
back when they were, when they were airing, that we hadn't even thought of at the time. But I mean, they get into, like we said, war,
Hmm.
PTSD. They go through a lot of the issues that they helped to address on the show. I know there were some regrets about what they wanted to pursue, but didn't. But it's very interesting to see that aspect of it, how it's the impact on the culture of television and beyond.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, Wayne, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about that unproduced episode that they put together.
All right.
All right, we're back. So as we mentioned in the beginning, this has a unique aspect to it because they bring together the writers, showrunners from the series to say if there's no studio involved, budget's not an issue. Um, what would be the start of that eighth season? 20 years later, they bring back the cast. Um, I thought it was a great use of this kind of connective mystery, which is a good way to kind of follow up on, we don't know where the characters have been necessarily, depending on where canon is going.
Hmm.
Um, but it reflected a lot of the cast. Uh, and I think after seeing the entire arc of that first episode, I'd definitely watch it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It would have been fantastic. It'd be fantastic. It really would be. I was surprised on some of their choices for where the characters had gone, especially Kira. I
Mm,
guess I never saw her heading in that direction, but the way they talked about her, it made sense.
yeah. Yeah, it seems to also connect to where we left with Cisco,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Which they did a great job of kind of answering that, like what happened to him. It felt to me personally like when I stopped watching the show, I was like, it felt natural considering how the series started, but it was
Hmm.
also a little bit like it felt like there was more to be said that we wouldn't get.
And we never did get. We never did get to. You know, whatever happened to Cisco. Well, let me. We did in the comics recently, but I don't think those are really part of the canon of Star Trek. So he's still out there, but they've never really been able to continue to explore his character. And I would love to
Yeah.
see this new season and find out what happened.
Yep. And when they do go through it, it's interesting how they don't necessarily take an entire segment of the documentary and just focus on
Hmm.
what would be that extra season. They kind of intersperse it with different characters. So when they reintroduce Kira and they have a chance to talk to Nana Visitor, um,
Hmm.
they kind of use that episode writing to dive more into her story and her behind the scenes and things like that,
Yeah,
um, which is a great idea. And they also put together a lot of, I think, very well animated um, animatics
yeah, they
for
did.
it, that help you kind of imagine a little bit more fluidly what would it entail and what we'd get out of it.
Hmm.
So I'm glad they went to that length with it.
And it was a pretty decent season opener. I'll got to admit that it had a really nice cliffhanger at the end of it. I mean, I really want to know what happens at the end after that. We've got the Defiant coming back from the wormhole. Obviously, there's some sort of new formidable enemy or force that was chasing them, but we never did find out exactly what that force was, which is a pity.
Yeah, yeah,
There was an attempt, actually. I did find this out that Ear Stephen Bear was contacted by, I believe it was IDW Comics, to actually write this as a comic series, but he unfortunately turned it down. So we'll never know.
yeah. Well, I'd definitely be able. I'd be very happy to see it imagined or played out, however they're able to do it, whatever kind of
Yeah,
media it takes to do so.
I would too.
Um, a lot of people came back together for this,
Yeah.
and we get perspective from people outside of the cast. Mark
Hmm.
Bernardin, one of my favorite podcasters and authors from Fat Man Beyond, joins for a little bit. I thought it was also interesting how they brought in a lot of fans for, I guess it was at a convention. They had a DS9 confessional.
Yeah, I think it was the 2017 Vegas convention, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they had a lot of heartfelt people coming on and, talking about what it meant to them, how it changed their life, how it influenced their career
Yeah.
choices, how it helped them through some personal issues. And those are always great stories to hear.
Yeah, and you hear that with all the Star Trek series. David and I heard quite a few of that when Voyager was wrapped up. We went to the series ending convention that they held, and we heard a lot of the stories of people who were affected by not just Star Trek but by Voyager, and I'm sure it's happened with all the series. And it's interesting to hear these. I don't think I've ever been that affected by Star Trek other than enjoying, an hour of television. But for some people, it's life changing.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to the range of characters that they had on this show. I mean,
Yeah.
every Star Trek iteration, it seems, gives you a broader range of characters and perspectives that I think a lot of people can see themselves in. I know that I remember hearing that Aaron Eisenberg was approached by a lot of veterans that related to his PTSD story,
Yes.
and his arc, and to think about how that character goes on a really big sweeping arc through the series. It speaks to how much they invest in the characters. I know that Ira had even said at one point that plot was important but secondary. It was more important to bring the most out of the characters that you possibly could.
Yes.
And we definitely get that with Deep Space Nine. I
Yeah, you
think
do.
that's one of the major strengths of it.
I agree.
Um, I loved hearing from Renee, just because I miss him
Oh,
a lot.
yes.
I think he was so fantastic. I remember I clapped when he said, when he mentioned Benson, because I remember watching that a lot when I was a
I
kid.
loved him and Benson. I've watched a few of the episodes recently. I love that show.
Yeah, so good. But also Jeffrey Coombs had some great stories, and he was somebody else that you had met recently, right?
Yes, a same convention at GalaxyCon. Worth going to if you like Star Trek.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it just shows how, his character of Wayun seems like it would be a secondary character. Seems like it would be a supporting character. But one of the things this doc brings to light is how many secondary or supporting characters, so to speak, were given the chance to shine and really expand beyond just that support role.
Yeah, that surprised me too. And they had like the bulletin board where they had one of them had the cast in it, and then they panned over and showed the secondary cast. There's so many of them. I never realized until you really think about it how many secondary characters, and they're all very strong characters that had their own individual story arcs that were in this series. It just amazed me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Casey Biggs was a
Yeah.
great example that came out in this doc. His character of Damar could have been easily dismissed as a henchman, so to speak,
Right.
but had a very, very interesting arc all the way through to the end of I guess the end of the Dominion War, near the end of it. And he gets a chance to speak about his character, where it went,
Yep.
and the appreciation of those types of roles, and how that kind of helps them to be more important than just a secondary role. When you look at that whole wall board that you mentioned, I can't imagine them removing any of those characters.
No,
At all.
they're too important. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
too important to the story.
Yeah. Any other favorite people you heard from?
I mean, you mentioned my favorites. Andrew Robinson. I love Garrick. I loved him from the beginning. He had such a great story. Him and Bashir, two of my. It was a great pairing. One of the best Star Trek pairings ever. And I loved hearing him. Even in real life, as Andrew Robinson, he's incredible to listen to. But seeing, Rene Auberginois again. I love Odo. And I mentioned that he had passed away just a few months after this. Watching I watched the documentary back when it first came out, and then watching it again this week for this podcast, it was kind of bittersweet with all that in mind. But it brought back a lot of good memories of me watching the show, and just made me remember how great of a character actor he is and everything that he's done. I love Odo and I love Renee.
One of the things along those lines that surprised me when I watched this, and when I saw it on Roku with ads, I also saw some additional clips on YouTube that I guess didn't make it to the final cut.
Yeah.
One of those, unfortunately, was some perspective from Aaron Eisenberg on how he felt that his own life paralleled Nog's story. And it's a very emotional moment for Aaron, who, like Renee, unfortunately we lost too soon. But I think it's great that they were able to get that perspective from him, that they were able to get that footage and give him a chance to talk about Nog, because as we see in the 8th season, they start writing, Nog is a very important character who is in a very different place when you start, a pretty unexpected place.
And one of the biggest chuckles for me in the episode was when he finds out what they had planned for his character, his reaction.
He has a great reaction to that. Yeah, and we won't say what happens, but
no,
he does a great bit. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think it goes without saying, I'd recommend seeing this. Obviously, for any Deep Space Nine, it's an absolute C. Wayne, would you agree?
Oh, definitely, of course. But I do suggest waiting and watching it until after you've seen Deep Space Nine. I think you'll appreciate it a lot more that way. It's just, you need to have the full story and then hear all the behind the scenes and the continuation.
Yeah. And I know that we're going to get a chance to cover this in Starter Treks a little bit later.
I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I can't wait. But I would also recommend for anybody who watched Deep Space Nine and maybe gave up on it a little too early, or something kind of threw you off and you didn't quite feel like it because it didn't feel like Next Generation or whatever, I'd encourage you to take a look at this documentary and get a little bit more insight into what it meant, how many different directions this show is able to go in, and what you can get out of it. Because I think for any Star Trek fan in general, let alone of the series, they'd be missing out if they missed this series.
I agree.
And I think that seems like it's pretty true for a lot of Star Trek series. I think a lot of people kind of fall in love with theirs and then maybe take a break from it. Give it a chance. There are some spoilers, obviously, in here if you haven't seen the entire show. But once you hear what they've put into it and where they plan to go with it, I think you'll be surprised, and I think you'll be pleased if you give it a chance.
I agree.
Wayne, where did you end up seeing this?
Well, I watched it when it came out on Blu-ray for the first time back in 2000 and was it 18 or 19? I think it was 18. I had pre-ordered in Amazon and waited for months, and I remember it arrived 2 days before the actual release date, so I watched that night and loved it. And then I immediately went and found out that they had a soundtrack CD for it, and I ordered it as well. That is something we didn't mention too, is that they got back so many of the actors talked about. But they also got Dennis McCarthy to do the music for this documentary. He did the music for the TV series. So and I'm a huge fan of Dennis McCarthy and all of his work. So I ordered the CD. But that's how I first saw it. I saw it when it came out on Blu-ray.
Now, does that Blu-ray come with extras?
Yes, it has the extra scenes, including some of the ones that were mentioned, the bits where they're talking about trials and tribulations, and I believe it also has the scenes with Aaron that you were discussing. There's quite a lot. I'm trying to remember. I watched them, but that was back when it first came out. There's probably about a half hour, I believe, of extra interview footage, including some. There is some audition footage on there, which I was not aware of, but Peter Capaldi actually auditioned for this series.
Wow.
And it's on there. A lot of the audition, what ifs that could have been on the series. Yeah.
Well, if anybody's looking for that Blu-ray, they can still find it on Amazon. But if you prefer streaming, I know that I was able to, I saw that it was available on a lot of different services. I was able to find it on Roku, uh, with ads. Um, but I'd definitely be interested in seeing that, especially if it has extras to get into Trials and Tribulations. That was a brilliant episode.
And also, too, if you want to stream it as well and watch the documentary, it's also available on Pluto TV with ads and also Tubi, which is where I watched it recently, right? For this, it's also available there with ads.
Cool. Good to know. Well, we'll definitely be looking for more documentaries like this to talk about. I know that I haven't seen many. Wayne, I think you've probably seen the majority of them, or a fair amount of them. But I think it's good to kind of help people understand what they could get out of it, um, to give it a chance, because there's a lot of things to watch nowadays. But a lot of these, looking back at the series that we grew up with, I think it'd be a great way to look back on it.
And let me mention too that the producers and creators of this documentary are currently right now working on a Voyager version that went into crowdfunding and succeeded, and that we should be seeing within the next year a Voyager version of a very similar documentary like this.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to. Starter Treks will be my first full go around with Voyager, so I'll have to wait on that documentary. But I'm glad they're making it. And as always, thanks to our listeners for joining us. Hailing frequencies are always open for you to share your thoughts and questions on Facebook, Instagram, and your favorite social channels. You can email us at afilmbypodcast@gmail.com. Find us online at afilmbypodcast.com. And if you're looking for more exclusive content and swag, send some Latinum our way through Patreon. We'll see you next time for another episode of Phasers Set to Stun.